All right, hello everyone, and welcome to today's Worspa live stream featuring a very exciting new distillery in the Caribbean, Renegade Rum Distillery. Today we have your host, Matt Petrick, who is joined by three special guests from the team at Renegade. So we have Graham, Devon, and Bertrand, who I will let Matt give you a larger introduction to in just a moment. Real quick before we jump in, my name is Will Hookinga from Zavvy.co, and want to give you all a quick tour of how to interact with Matt and his guests throughout the presentation. So to your right, you'll see a chat box. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're tuning in from. I already see several familiar faces and some new folks as well from all over the world. We've got San Francisco, Virginia, Panama, Trinidad. So global audience today, always cool to see. If you have a question at any point during the presentation, there's a button at the bottom that says ask a question. Just hit that button, type your question in there. Matt's going to be keeping an eye on questions throughout the presentation, and we'll save some time at the end to go through those. And last but not least, please feel free to invite your friends to join us. There's a share button at the top that makes that easy. But with all of that said, Matt, I will turn things over to your care now.
Thank you, Will. A pleasure to be back here. I think this is our 14th session we've done here with the Zavvy Worspa collaboration. A little bit about it. I know a lot of you who've watched this for all these times are well aware of this, but for the people for tuning in for the first time, this is a series of videos taking people behind the scenes at various distilleries in various Worspa member countries. Grenada being one of those member countries. Worspa, if you're not familiar, is the West Indies Rum and Spirits Association, which represents the many of the rum making countries, of the independent rum making countries in the Caribbean. And when COVID started and we realized people couldn't travel and they wanted more rum related content, we sort of jumped in and put the series together. And I think it's been pretty amazing, like how much various distilleries like DDL and St. Lucia Distillers and National Rums of Jamaica have shared with us. And I'm particularly excited about this one, Renegade in Grenada, because in the before times, last January, or the January of this year, I actually visited Grenada, a beautiful, beautiful island. I definitely want to return. But while I was there, I met Graham and Bertrand and Devon and toured the Renegade Distillery as it was getting ready to start producing. And now it is, just within the past month or two, is now actually making its first rum. So it's really exciting stuff. And you'll be seeing this in just a moment here. But before we jump into the slides, I'd just like Graham, Bertrand, and Devon to each sort of jump in and give us a sentence or two about what your role is at Renegade. So Graham, let's start with you.
Okay, I am Graham Williams, and I am the local director of Renegade Rum Distillery Limited, well, actually Renegade Rum Group, which comprises Renegade Rum Distillery Limited and Cane Co Limited. So yeah, I'm the man on the ground here.
Okay, good to know. And also associated with another Grenadian distiller, as I recall.
Yeah, I am also associated with Westerhall Estate Limited, and have been for many years, and going 1986. So okay. I've been around rum a long time.
Excellent. And you mentioned Cane Co, and that's a natural segue to Bertrand. Tell us a little bit about yourself. BJ? I think BJ is cut off. Oh.
Hello? I'm not hearing properly. Having a connection problem. Are you hearing me clear now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
No, we don't hear you.
All right.
We hear you now.
My name is Bertrand John. I'm the agriculture director for Cane Co. That's the company that's responsible for providing the cane to the distillery so that Devon can manufacture the rum.
Excellent. And last but not least, Devon, tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience.
Well, I'm Devon Did. Yeah, I'm responsible for basically production, the distillery operations, and the other operational process that involves the production of the rum from the sugarcane. Yeah.
Great. And if I'm not mistaken, what I'm seeing behind you is actually one of the stills you have there at Renegade.
Yes, it is. So you'll see the pot still in the picture behind me.
Yes, excellent.
Yeah.
So just a quick note, you might want to adjust your camera a little bit. You're almost off camera here, so
Okay.
you too. So great.
Okay. Good.
Perfect. Okay, so let's jump into the slides. Graham, you want to take it away?
Okay, so sure, I'll take it away. So right, that slide will give you a little background into Renegade Rum Distillery. We, as mentioned before, we are part of a group, or Renegade Rum Group, with a parent company called Renegade Spirits in the UK. And Renegade Spirits is the CEO of Renegade Spirits is a man called Mark Renier, who's been involved in the spirits business for some time. He may be known for his association with Bruichladdich Distillery in Islay, and more recently Waterford Distillery in Ireland. And in both those distilleries, he set about on this idea he had of bringing a well-known concept of terroir, which exists in the wine industry, and Mark believed that it can also exist in the spirits industry. So he went about identifying or producing whiskey from known raw material. By that I mean by barley that was grown on specific farms and distilled it in such a way to separate the spirit produced by each farm and each area. Thereabouts, the only variable being the raw material, and hence any flavor differential would in turn come from the barley as opposed to the methods by which it was produced, since that is consistent throughout. So he set about with Bruichladdich, was very successful, sold that, and now he's involved with Waterford Distillery, which recently went to market at the beginning of this year. And so far it's been doing very well. Mark had been trying to get this going in rum for quite some time, and eventually came to Grenada through a mutual friend in 2015, and then returned in 2016 to actually start the process. In 2016, both Cane Co Limited and Renegade Rum Distillery were registered and established, and Cane Co hit the ground running by after a feasibility study was done with the assistance of Booker Tate. We imported tissue culture sugarcane plants, 6 different varieties, and had them grown here in a nursery, in a greenhouse provided by the government of Grenada, and then later on into the nursery that we now have at Wester Hall, which is an approximately 28-acre sugarcane nursery with 6 different varieties of sugarcane. So that started in 2017. The nursery was established in Wester Hall, and we started to propagate sugarcane on a commercial basis. Now, this is in the island of Grenada, which, like most Caribbean islands, smaller Caribbean islands, did not have much of a sugarcane industry left. The last serious sugarcane production in Grenada sort of fizzled out towards the end of 1980, and then eventually in 2004 with Hurricane Ivan. I think that was the final nail in the coffin of any meaningful sugarcane grown, apart from what's done at River Antoine, which is on a much smaller scale. So we set about trying to identify areas and plots, and the original concept was to have Grenadian farmers grow cane and we purchase it. However, as it developed, we discovered that there weren't many Grenadian farmers with the land resource or clear title to actually produce farms big enough. And as a result, we had to get involved in the actual farming and growing of the cane, and have set about by leasing large parcels of land from various landowners, mostly private, and are growing sugarcane. So to date, we have approximately 230 acres, and we're hoping in this year, now that the distillery is up and functioning, to expand that by another 120 for this year, to eventually get to a figure in between 400 to 600 acres of cane. So that's the plan on the cane co side. Renegade Rum Distillery began construction in earnest in September of 2018, and we couldn't have picked a better year to start, because in 2019, we made good progress, and then lo and behold, 2020 came along and we were confronted with COVID in March, which impacted significantly on our commissioning of equipment. The construction actually stopped, or was completed in I would say around June, July of this year. But the commissioning is still ongoing. Main challenges was getting people travel, getting the technicians to come in and actually commission the equipment. That pretty much ground to a halt in March. But we have been striving on, and made good progress to when we were able to have our first distillation on the 21st of September 2020. So that's been sort of the way forward with Renegade. And just basically to move on to the next slide, if you may will. We have here the Renegade story, which to coin a phrase of a distiller, Devon, he called it the holy trinity of rum production. And by that, reference is made to the 3 T's: terroir, traceability, and transparency. And as I mentioned earlier, the concept here is to distill rum from sugarcane juice while keeping track of the origin of the cane harvested, so that the spirits produced can be traced back to the farm, field, terroir, and cane variety. So what we've done on all our farms is we have identified various parcels or areas specific to soil type identified, the geographic conditions, whether it's hilly, flat, loamy soil, and have sort of designed our farms and marked off our planting so that we can identify where each cane is grown on specific areas on the farm. So all this data is collected. In addition to that data, variety and location, we are also tracking things like the weather conditions. We have weather stations on all our farms, so we track rainfall, temperature, to see what effect weather has on the cane production as well. The idea being that once we produce rum, we'll be able to trace it back directly to the source. So not only to the variety of cane grown, but to the actual area where it was grown, inclusive of the weather and other conditions, whether it was a drought year or a rainy year, and all that information is captured. So we have full transparency and traceability back to the actual area of the farm where the cane was grown. And this we believe will.
I was going to say really quick. We're seeing already, sort of like a vision of what this might be with the Waterford Distillery, which is just now starting to release their first aged whiskeys, and you'll see like each bottling has like the specific field information about this specific harvest in the whiskey, and my understanding is that Renegade Rums will be similar in that regard.
That's correct. So on each bottle of Waterford whiskey, there's a code. And when you put that code in on the website, it will actually give you all the information of that farm and where it was grown and the particular variety of barley and all the other data that goes along with it. So similarly, that will be the same thing with Renegade Rum.
Okay. Excellent.
So,
BJ, are you taking us through cane co?
if there are any questions or so, feel free to jump in as we go along.
In relation to
Jay Hennis?
cane co, gentlemen, are you hearing me?
We can hear you.
Yes. In relation to cane co, we are responsible, as I stated before, for providing all the cane that are necessary so that Mr. Devon can manufacture the best rum in the world. At the moment, we have 9 farms that have already been cultivated, and we have 2 coming very soon. We are in the process of cultivating 2 other farms, which would gives us approximately another 50 acres. This would probably give us a total of about 300 acres. We have 45 different terroirs, as Graham was just previously discussing, and that is based on soil type, location, climate, varieties. There are weather stations, as was mentioned, installed on all those farms. Data are collected almost on a daily basis so that we can analyze and trace where our product actually come from. We have 6 varieties of cane that we are working with at the moment. Chances are we may increase the quantity of varieties that we may use in the future. However, at the moment, we are sticking to 6 varieties, and we are keeping information on those varieties so we can select and the varieties that we need and eliminate the varieties that are not suitable for us.
Hey, BJ.
Yes.
Question: if I remember correctly, one of those cane fields on this map here is actually adjoining the distillery or very close to the distillery.
Yes, we have a farm that we are now developing right around the distillery, which will be an organic farm. We have no intention of using fertilizer or chemicals or other inputs that are made up of chemicals on this farm. However, we have a farm very close by, which is walking distance from the distillery, which is Paul's farm. We haven't harvested that field yet, but we intend to do so in 2021, very early in 2021.
Okay.
If you notice, our fields are located on the northern and eastern side of the country, and most of them are located along the coastal area because the lands along the coastal area in Grenada are much flatter and more suitable for sugarcane production. Hence the reason, if you look upon the maps, you will see that most of our farms are located along the coastal region.
Right. If I remember correctly, that middle part of the country, sort of like the backbone, is actually rainforest. Would be challenging.
Yes, the central part of the country is very hilly and mountainous, so we don't cultivate cane in those areas. And plus, you have a lot of rainfall. The rainfall in the central part of the country is extremely high, unlike the coastal area. Is everyone hearing? We can move on to the other slide. Could we move the slide downwards again so I can see? This is one of our farm that is located at River Antoine. That's the slide before. And if you notice, we are very careful as to how we are cultivating our lands. Because our lands are situated on the coastal area and there are a lot of mangrove close by and beachfront, we tend to ensure that we, leave windbreak, we leave buffer zone, we put in contour drains, we, carry out all the necessary cultural practice so we don't contaminate and pollute. With regard to the preparation and planting of sugarcane, we are using the handbook that we got from Bukatit, one of the leading consulting sugarcane folks, and we are doing our work accordingly based on the specifics that they handed to us, because they were the one that initially started sorting out our cane business, so to speak. With the advent of COVID, we realized that our health and safety standard had to be up to mark. So we ensured that all our workers were given masks and protective clothing. Even at this present point in time, we ensure that our workers don't utilize central facilities for water and food provisions and stuff like that. We ensure that people are, are kept away from each other, so we keep, our social distancing intact. We ensure that the people who are using pesticides and weedicides and stuff are provided with the necessary protective clothing and gloves and boots, etc., overalls. With regard to the actual land preparation itself, we have our own machinery to do those kind of jobs. We do our plowing, our ridging. The cane selection is done by a committee, the management committee. They will decide which are the varieties that are planted on the different farms. Most of the lands that we are cultivating in Grenada for cane production, for cane coal, are lands that are what we call and consider as virgin lands. We go into those areas and remove these trees, then we subsoil, we retovate, we ridge, and then we plant. With regard to pest and weed management, we try to minimize the use of chemicals as much as possible. For the very reason that I mentioned before, most of our farms are located along the coastal area, and most of them have waterways running through them. So it's not in our advantage to use chemical on a regular basis. That's weedicide and pesticides and stuff like that. So we try to minimize the use of those chemicals and pesticides as much as possible. With regard to detrashing, what we do is that we plant our cane a bit closer than the normal stipulated distance. We have most of our cane planted at 3 feet apart rather than 5 feet apart. And because of the shady effect that it creates, it more or less reduces the quantity of weeds that are grown in our fields. And we only detrash when we are about to harvest. Maybe a month or so before we harvest, we detrash, so it makes harvesting a lot easier for us. Could we move on to the other slide? With regard to harvesting our cane, we tend to harvest at this point in time about 60 tons per day. And this is about approximately 1 acre per day, or acre plus per day. Our yields per acre is averaging about maybe 45 to 50 tons per acre. We use John Deere tractors to haul our cane to the distillery. And because of the distance of the field in relation to the distillery, in some cases, like the farms down in the south of the island, like Bacolet and Westerhall, we tend to augment the use of truckage so we can expedite the delivery rate, so the cane can reach the distillery on time, so we have a smooth flow of grinding when we normally in operation. That's it, gentlemen.
So a couple questions.
If there is any other question you want to ask?
A couple questions. If I remember correctly, what you're doing here in Grenada is essentially bringing back the sugar industry to, or not the River Antoine doesn't grow some sugar, but essentially sort of replanting sugar on a scale that hasn't really existed for many years. Is that correct?
Hasn't been seen for a lot of years.
That's correct.
What we are doing agriculturally in relation to the establishment of cane is something that Grenada haven't seen for the last 30, 40 years.
Okay. And in terms of the harvesting,
Yeah, it's
so is there?
if I
Go ahead.
no, I was gonna jump in. Sorry there, Matt. To say that as BJ was mentioning, it has been a challenge, the reintroduction of sugarcane on a large scale, or quite frankly any sort of large scale farming in Grenada. With the demise of the sugarcane industry, I would say in the early 80s, the farms and the agriculture in Grenada, apart from the stable cocoa and nutmegs, we haven't seen any new agricultural projects of this scale. It was mostly small vegetable gardens and 1 acre plots, and a large farm in Grenada is 2 acres of vegetables. So it has been a challenge to get labor and to get labor up to the speed of wanting to work on these farms. And, you know, we have, because of the topography of Grenada as well, we do a combination of hand cutting, and we have some small machines called cane thumpers that can harvest. But again, due to the delays in the construction of the distillery and the fact that we had to start planting the cane so early, we're yet to get to our optimum production in the farms, because many of the farms that we're harvesting now should have been harvested 4 to 6 months ago. So they're all overgrown, and we're also harvesting not at the right time of the year, but we have to prove concept, we have to commission the distillery. So some of the data, we're still slowly learning how to get it done and to get our numbers up. And we recognize and understand it's going to take a while before we become more efficient.
Right. Yeah, it is sort of a complicated dance. When I was there and driving around with BJ in his truck, he was like this field should have been cut, and this field should have been cut, and this field should have been cut. But it's complicated because like you can't distill without the cane arriving just that day. But also like if the distillery's not ready, well then you preemptively planted all this cane, and then what do you do with it? And and sort of like if there was additional equipment or anybody could have done something with it, it would have been a great benefit. But I think as I think BJ said at some point the cane was just harvested and plowed back under.
Correct. The same question, Matt. We got when we were harvesting the fields and having to shred and destroy the cane and plow it back in and all that. People kept saying, "Well, why don't you use it for something?" And they say, "Okay, well, the guy with the cane juice. Well, we give him one shipment of 1 trailer load of cane, and he's good for a month."
Right.
Or we worked with trying to give some of the cane to River and Twine, similar
Right.
problem.
Right.
They wanted us to cut for like 2 hours a day and give them the cane, and so
Right.
it's been a big expensive struggle to get to where we are today.
For sure, sure. And I know like the Grenada Sugar Factory is hasn't really processed cane in 20 years or so.
It's difficult for anyone on the island to absorb the quantity of cane that we are producing.
Right.
We are producing that amount of cane that is difficult for any institution to take up this quantity of cane except Renegade.
Right. Okay, so let's move on.
And as most people...
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. No, I was just going to say, as most people in this call would know, that sugarcane is almost impossible to get rid of, because as fast as you dump it away, it starts to regrow wherever you throw it. So you have to shred it. You have to actually mash it up or grind it to get rid of it. So it's been a challenge.
But I bet you have amazingly well fertilized soils.
At a high cost.
Yeah. So let's jump into the distillery.
Yeah, so Moving along to Renegade Distillery, finally completed after a year and a half. Devon, you want to bring us through the distillery?
All right. So in that slide,
Layout?
yeah, in that slide you'll see the layout of a distillery. To the right of the bottom, you see that what we call the weigh bridge. The weigh bridge is what we use to actually weigh the cane as it comes into the plant, into the factory. That is part of our track and trace process, because it will tell you what volume of cane comes in per day, how much cane they have to mill per day, and so on. So then you move on to the mill house. And the mill house is where you actually do the grinding or the milling of the cane. And down from the mill house, you go down to the biomass boiler. It is important to emphasize that we call that our utility building, in the sense that it houses the mill house, the boiler, and all other utilities. For example, your chiller, our compressor, our cooling towers, or our CIP makeup plants, or hot and cold water makeup tanks, our juice and yeast kits are all housed in that. So that whole entire building is a utility building. Now, it's convenient that the mill house is close to the boiler house, because after milling, that bagasse is what goes on to generate use as fuel for the biomass boiler. Then you see the brew house going down south. There is from the juice tank in the mill house, there is a pipe bridge that will take the juice through pipes into the brew house, so we do our fermentation. And there's another pipe bridge from the brew house to the still house, where we transfer that fermented wash for distillation. Down to the left top of the screen, you will see the warehouse. That is where we have our aging, our barrel. In there, we have our IBC tank, so we do our dilution and aging also. And then to the top, on the bottom of the screen, is our wastewater treatment plant, where that two blue tank you see there is basically our water tanks, and the other three are our wastewater treatment tanks, which primarily deals with the primary and secondary treatment of our waste after processing.
Okay. I'll just want to add really quick. If you look at that configuration, it sort of looks like a triangle there. And when I was talking with Mark Renier about it during my visit, he said it was somewhat designed in the style of the Scotch whiskey distillery courtyards. It's like a similar concept.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So anyhow, just an observation.
Good. We're going to proceed. In terms of milling, as Graham and BJ spoke of our farms or our fields, our equipment was manufactured or supplied as a supplier into Union out of Brazil. One of the things you'll realize as we go through talking about the equipment is that all of our equipment come from different manufacturers all over the world. So it's like a international distillery, as you say, you have something from everywhere. Our milling capacity, as we are now basically currently running about 7 tons per day on a 10-hour shift. The mill basically comprised of a cane feeder, cane leveler, the cane knives. We have 3 mills, but they have the capacity for another one if we need to install it. After milling, of course, the juice go into the swirl tanks, and then there's a rotary screen that will filter that juice from mill and send it back up to the juice tank. We have the option of adding imbibition water, which is good, and which imbibition water have 2 main functions, of course. Or the main function, based on the manufacturer's design, is to help in extraction, because as we said before, that the bagasse that comes from the mill is what we'll be using in the furnace for the boiler, for the biomass boiler, which means that it should have a specific moisture content, which should coincide with the design of the biomass boiler. The imbibition water will be providing that.
Question for that. I've heard some distilleries may actually use the cane juice before they send it off for processing. May do imbibition with cane juice rather than water. Are you doing the water or cane juice?
Well, we could do imbibition we could do imbibition with water, and we have the option of a second soul tank at the back where we could also do imbibition with juice.
Okay.
Good. And then we have that bagasse conveyor, which
I think
takes.
if I could cut in here with. Sorry, Devon.
Sure,
I was
go.
just going to mention on that point, Matt, that because of with our current harvesting, because of the unseasonal time for harvest, we experiencing low bricks in the sugarcane. So we have not been necessarily using a lot of inhibition water, and indeed, and in fact, have been putting juice back in some cases.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, mainly because of the concern with dilution and going too low on the bricks, which are already low.
Right.
But certainly, you know, it is something that was considered.
Okay.
And just to add again to understand the challenges of
Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that, yeah, this mill was also commissioned by ourselves with interunion dialing in on Zoom calls and FaceTime and even actually just dialing in on our equipment. Because coming from Brazil, they weren't able to travel across to Grenada to commission. And they will be visiting, if all things go well, in January to give us the final adjustments and stuff like that. So it's been very challenging.
For sure. And just for people watching, it's hard to see in this picture here, but the actual mill itself is there in the bottom left. Is sort of like, you see the blue sort of bars there over in the bottom left there. That runs for probably, I don't know, 80 or 100 feet. It's quite large when you see it up close.
Well, if you go to the next slide, there's a graphic of the actual mill.
Right.
So if Devon, if you want to talk through that.
Well, basically, it shows a graphic of the mill. You'll see the cane intake conveyor where it has the leveler and the knives. The cane will be cut up into pieces there to go to the first mill, and then it will go over to the second mill. And then the third mill, as I told you, we mentioned earlier. At the back, there's the option of the foot mill, but the foot mill is not installed as yet. At the bottom, you see the cane juice tank. That is what I was referring to as the soul tank, and soul tank 1 and soul tank 2. As Graham mentioned, we could collect the juice from soul tank 2 and use it as imbibition. As you see, it comes over where you have cane juice, and where the imbibition water line comes over. Now the cane juice that we transfer to the juice tank, we take it from the cane juice tank 1 or the soul tank 1, and we pump that over to the juice tank. Of course, the bagasse will go in the other direction where it goes through a conveyor, go up the conveyor, and then go in preparation for the biomass boiler.
Just a little correction, Devon, to prove that I'm listening to what you said. It does go up to the rotary screen.
Yeah, and then to the juice
bagasse extraction before going, and then to the juice tank.
To the juice tank.
Right, and I think it's interesting about the bagasse path there. It's almost a direct pipeline to the boiler. If I remember, it goes to a tank and then like another conveyor belt or not to a holding container, and then another conveyor sort of takes it directly up to the biomass. It's not something where it sits and dries for days or weeks before it's used. I imagine crushed cane, the bagasse could end up being boiled that very same day, or powering the boiler the very same day.
Yeah, that's true. That is why the moisture content of the bagasse is so important.
Good.
So if we continue along the line, you'll see, as we mentioned, that in terms of providing steam or energy for the process, we need steam, of course, for our distillation process, for our CIP makeup tanks, to make up our hot water tanks and so. And the biomass boiler it's a huge boiler, and it uses the bagasse Of course, I think by design, it said that it could take plus or minus 50% moisture content. It is designed by John Thompson out of South Africa, installed by them also. Um, as Graham alluded earlier, that boiler is not yet commissioned because of COVID reasons also. The inability for them to travel. They were here in March. I think March they left because they were on island to commission it, and then because of the COVID, they had left the island around February or March. They will be back in January also, 2021, for commissioning that boiler. In the meantime, we have a small backup diesel boiler that we're using for the process and commissioning the plant as it is now. Um, well, the biomass boiler, based on our demand for steam, so we know that, for example, we need maybe about a recommended boiler size based on the engineer's design, probably a little less than 3,000 kilograms per hour. The biomass boiler will be providing much more than that. So you have what we have called an organic Rankine cycle, which that excess steam will be used now to generate electricity that goes back to our grid. Yeah, basically, so the important thing about having that organic Rankine cycle, because when that biomass boiler lights up, I mean, it will be difficult for we will not be taking it out. It will be running 24/7. Unlike the small backup diesel boiler, which you could turn on off when you need it, but the biomass boiler, I mean, the time it takes to light up, there's no point in out in it. So that excess steam, of course, will be going to the organic Rankine cycle, or we call it OC, for generation of electricity. The next process, of course, is fermentation. We have 12 fermentation vessels. We call them washbacks. They are horizontally placed. They have a capacity of 40,000 liters, but we will, from a process point of view, we work with 36,000 liters. The idea is to have a washback per day or fill per day, which means that the washback are paired up. So the intention is to have at least 36 by 2, which is 70,000 liters of juice, of mixed juice per day ready for fermentation. So the washback are paired up in that way. We are in the process of developing our own proprietary strain of yeast. We're working with Lallemand on that. However, because we started now with commissioning with a strain we know off the shelf, and we played around with different fermentation time, but we know the standard time is around 24 to 36 hours. So we've played around with the 48 hours, the 60 hours, and looking what we get. But of course, we go back and we will standardize it because we want to prove the concept of terroir and the traceability. We anticipate a wash strength of plus or minus around 5.86% alcohol. So we will have a starting bricks, maybe about 5, starting the wash about 15, and goes down to all over again. So we could have an attenuation of probably 6% alcohol. One of the standard thing you will see there is that the washback is horizontally placed. There's a number of reasons for that. Horizontal washback is not a common thing in the rum industry in the Caribbean, as most of us know that. There is the advantage, well, one of the factors of having a horizontal washback, of course, is the logistics in terms of this tank is 40,000 feet long. It came from Ireland to Grenada in a 40-foot container, well packed. There's nothing else could have fit in that container. So you could think about having that tank standing 40,000 feet in the air in a small island like Grenada, of course. The height of the roof, and so that logistics is what we decided to put the horizontal tanks rather than vertical tanks. Secondly, in terms of conditioning of the yeast and the stress factor on the yeast, we think it will work better, because one of the things that we know that if you make the yeast happy, then your fermentation will be happy. You make the yeast happy, the yeast will make you happy. And then one of the most important formula for yeast comfort, of course, is like a height to volume ratio of a vessel, the vessel it is in. Now, if you have a shorter vessel of the same volume, you will have a greater surface area both at the bottom of the vessel and at the top of the liquid inside of it. Now, this will give the suspended yeast more room to toil around and feel better and have those little microorganisms working better for you. So that's one of the factors that we think is an advantage of having the horizontal tank. In that same picture, you will see in that same frame, you will see what we call the fermentation skid. And that we use that for conditioning of the yeast, of course. We all know that the fermentation process is exothermic. So when the yeast work best at between particular temperatures. So we have our set points in terms of when the fermentation is taking place and it exceeds the comfort zone of the yeast. So we have a chiller system and some heat exchangers on that skid that will actually cool down the vessels, cool down the temperature of the water so the yeast could be comfortable again. Another advantage is that in preparation of having that skid is that you could hold your wash for a longer period of time at your preset temperature or your process value. Because, for example, if your steel cannot take it for some unfortunate breakdown or something like that, you have the ability to keep your wash for a longer time by cooling it down and holding it there.
Okay. And it's my understanding that these horizontal fermentation tanks they're not at all common in rum, but they are becoming more popular in wine and beer, for example.
Yeah, I've seen them a lot in beer industry now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. If you look at it in terms of conditioning the yeast also, and the fact that you may have to recirculate using the heat exchangers, it is easier to recirculate in a horizontal tank in terms of the charge, because imagine that vessel was standing 40 feet in the air, and you have to send that pump to recharge up there, and all those are the factors. They may sound as minute factors, but actually when the process are taking place, you will notice that it helps with efficiency and those sort of things.
Are you able to, do you filter out and reuse the yeast from batch to batch, or do you just send it into the still?
No, we just send it into the still for now. We don't recycle the yeast.
Okay.
After fermentation, we go to distillation. We are at Renegade also. We believe that rum is made in fermentation and separated in distillation. We have a pot still. The manufacturer of the pot still is Forsyth, so Scotland, the famous Forsyth. The pot still is a double retort continuous pot still, but a capacity of 10,000 for the pot. That's a working capacity, I should say. And your retort 1,300 liters, and your retort 2 for your high wines 1,000 liters. These are just the working capacity of that. So our first run was on the pot still. We've commissioned it. As Graham alluded, that we had to do most of that by ourselves because of the travel restrictions again. So the local team did most did all the commissioning. We had input, we seek advice where we needed to. And we got our first cut actually came out on the 21st of September from the pot still. So far we are happy with what we've been getting, and most of our production to date was basically on the pot still. And then we have a continuous column still, same manufacturer, which is Forsyth. This column still, the feed rate is like 60 liters per minute, so we could do 3,600 liters of wash per hour. Of course, it is not we don't have as many trays as some of the traditional column stills in the Caribbean. We only have over 16 copper trays and 19 in the stripping column and 16 on the rectifying column. If the basis of having that means that 16 on the stripping column, you probably might get 85 to 90% alcohol as ABV in terms of the distillate strength, compared to some of the pots still that we are accustomed to in the Caribbean that may have some more trees, and we could go up to 95, 96. We commissioned that ourselves again. We ran it once. We plan to run it this week again. And we'll see what we get from it. But basically, we haven't been using that much because of our the rate of production from the farms, the volume of wash we've been getting. But we've proven the concept. It's working, and we had a one-run production from it.
Right, and I want to have you elaborate on that a little bit. So each day is a particular batch, and you are distilling one batch at a time. How do you decide whether this batch will go in the pot still versus this batch will be column stilled? How do you make those decisions?
Well, from production planning now, I mean, we know one of the fundamental differences between a column still and a pot still is basically the volume of wash you have available. There's no point in I mean, not a difference, but in choosing which one to use. There's no point in choosing a column run when you have a small volume of wash. I think the pot still comes in handy if you have a small farm and you get basically you get 36,000, 40,000 liters from that farm. You may choose to use the pot still because you could do it in batches. But when you have a larger farms and you're getting longer runs, like a 3, 4, 5 days run, then we will go to the column still. So that's the basis for in terms of which we use at this point in time. Going forward, we may decide different.
And I suppose at some point there is the option of, if you get a large enough batch, where you could still distill some of it through the column still, or most of it through the column still, and a little bit through the pot still, and then do side by sides.
Well, we have that option based on the design of the utilities and the requirements for the column in terms of the steam requirements, the cooling requirements, and the chill water requirements. We are capable of rolling the pot and the column still at the same time.
Okay.
We have the capacity to do that. So at some point we'll be doing that also.
Okay.
One of the things that we boast about at Renegade Rum is women in rum. We have an all-female distillation team, 4 young ladies. So I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have another all-female distillation team in another distillery around. So that is something we're very proud of and we boast about. We have 4 young ladies. They don't have much. They haven't been in the rum except one. Haven't been in the rum industry before, but they're smart. They're intelligent. All tertiary education graduates, and they're doing well so far. And you can see them in the picture. They look happy. September 21st was a milestone for us, but from all the challenges that Graham spoke about as it relates to how we get there, how the humps and the bumps in the road from 2017 to now 2018 to now, where we make our first straight cut. Everybody was excited looking for that first cut. That was on September 21st, 2020 from a farm last suggest. As Graham mentioned earlier also, the substrate for fermentation is not the quality that we expected or we have or we wanted. We were working with very low bricks, low sugar content, and so we had a challenge of ensuring that we get in. We run it on the pot still. So in terms of collecting high wines and low wines to charge that, we had to do a preliminary run to collect some of that, and then we actually got rum spirits on the 21st on that strike where we get up to 76% ABV. Based on the strength of the wash or the ABV in the wash and what we charge the pot in, theoretically that ABV that we receive was within, if you look at the vapor that comes out from 42 or 42% in your high wines, and so you get around 76% ABV as a distillate strength. So we are happy that we were able to prove that concept. The organoleptic on that was good, so we actually decided we go make a cut and call it rum spirits. What you see in that photo there is the team that day, and that slide is the team that they enjoying that moment, of course. And our CEO, Mark Renier, with his son, he had the opportunity to fill the first barrel in a very manual way, of course, just pumping it into the barrel. I think it's something Mark Renier did with most of his distilleries where he unfold the first barrel. Graham could speak a little more on that. Yeah. So from that point on, since our first distillation to now, as I say, we've been using the pot still more frequent than the column still. And the concept is proven, and we're satisfied with the organoleptic disparate discussing so that we get in. And there you see our warehousing. Our warehouse, of course, because most of our product will be, we try to have age or premium product. Of course, we have so far some American oak cast. We have some French oak. We also have some Andean oak on the way. So what you see is a photo of the barrels that we have so far. In that warehouse, we'll have a dilution, of course, of the spirits. Then we will barrel it and we'll age it in that warehouse.
Okay. Question for you: Do you have sort of a preset dilution strength that you're shooting for, or is it going to vary from barrel to barrel?
No, we'll have a preset strength that we will be shooting for. We're thinking around 70%.
Okay.
As the strength for putting into the barrel.
Okay. Thanks.
Then we have always one of the things that was of concern to Mark, of course, and his team, is waste management. I think Mark Renier built the distillery from inside, from out, come in, where he found a place where he could have a proper waste treatment facility before choosing the site for the distillery, because he looked at many other sites on the island, and the waste treatment option is very near and dear to his heart, and is a big part of Renegade's Rum environmental management plan, of course. We know that we'll have two basic waste streams: the vina from the process and the bagasse from the milling process. Now, the Venus is the bagasse, as we already spoke about earlier, will be used in the biomass boiler. Of course, after you boil that bagasse, what you get all there will be ash and so. And we have decided that we are planning, or we are in the phase of developing a compost heap where we could take all that ash and all the remains of the bottoms from the fermenters and so and the sludge to do composting. Now, the Venus, we have a wastewater treatment plant that speaks of a Venus tank. So in the distillery itself, we have a heat exchange skid where we exchange the heat from the Venus with the wash before we send it to the still. Now that cool Venus, we get it to come out around 35 degrees Celsius. We have it in a Venus tank, and then we have an effluent sump where we pump from that Venus tank into that effluent sump. In that effluent sump, also receive all the wash downs from CIP. So we know that Venus is a bit acidic, but the wash down from the CIP, because we use caustic, and the blow down from the boiler, all that goes to the sump to try to increase the pH of that effluent stream. Then we send that up to our wastewater treatment plant, where we have the first tank is our sludge tank, and we have a screen there where you screen the solids out. And when you screen the solid out, the liquid will go to our first tank, what we call our effluent one, and the sludge will go down into the sludge tank, which is a smaller of the three tanks you see in the slide. In the Venus buffer tank, we balance the pH and the temperature from effluent one. So we have some caustic kiosks, we have dosing kiosks, a polymer kiosk, and a caustic kiosk, where we have pH probes, level transmitters, and level switches on those tanks. So we will be balancing the pH there, and of course balancing the temperature there also. I mean, the temperature already comes out at 35 after we extract all the heat from it through the heat exchange skid, but it rises a little because of the blow down in the boiler. Once we're comfortable with that, the effluent from effluent one will overflow into effluent two, and we only extract from effluent two. So we have a fine caustic dosing system and a coarse caustic dosing system where both the pH is balanced, but the pH in effluent 2 is always balanced, and this is the one that we discharge into our infiltration trench. We have an infiltration trench that is 200 meters long. It comes from effluent tank 2, goes down to the trench. There's a junction box where we divide the trench into two, where we have 100 meter one side and 100 meter the other side. Why the trench? The site of the trench was chosen because we had a number of tests done in that soil type to make sure you have the right infiltration rate, soil population test. The trench is 8 feet, I think it is 8 feet deep, yeah, and 3 feet wide, where we have gravel beds and pipes in the trench where we have the pipes is perforated pipes, of course, wrapped in and you have a gravel bed filtration system inside of that trench. What will happen is that based on the population tests, and so what was done along that contour line, it proved that we remove the clay layer, and under that is where you have the most population, and the waste when it leaves the buffer tank, the effluent tank too. The primary and secondary treatment already took place. The waste will leaves at a pH between 6 and 9, and we remove all the solids because we will add polymers and so on, and remove all the solids. So it's clear, there's very little solids going out in that waste into the effluent trench. That goes down to the trench, and then it infiltrates into the soil, and then there's a wetland area lower down where effluent is discharged. Now you see the term phytoremediation there, meaning that that's the farm BJ spoke about earlier, the organic farm that will be close in boundary with the distillery. We believe in the concept. It's one of our old concept of waste treatment, where you have the plant remediating the soil. Now, the cane and so will remediate any wastewater, and so that goes through the soil. Now, what we intend to prove is that also we will be doing the primary and the secondary treatment in the wastewater tanks and the effluent tank. But we know that we have some CODs and BODs still in the waste as it goes out, and the soil will remediate that. That's the main reason for the infiltration trench. We could guarantee you that after the primary and the secondary treatment, the waste is already ready to be discharged, and we at this point in time we are doing what we call fertigation, what most of you know about, where the waste is, after testing that waste, it is used in our fields at this moment. So we have proven that the primary and secondary treatment of our wastewater is working properly.
And I just want to add really quick that you mentioned the phytoremediation. The Renegade site itself has a really great blog post about that process and how it works.
Yep. Good.
Yeah, that has not. We're just beginning to use the trench as it's now, wastewater plant is now fully commissioned. So we're just starting to use that.
Right.
The next slide here shows because our biomass boiler has not been working, we have excess bagasse, and one of the ways we've been disposing of that bagasse is to actually put it back in the cane fields as mulch, and that's been working quite well. So after harvest, we distribute the bagasse, which helps with weed control and also provides some mulch to the sugarcane plants. BJ might elaborate a little bit more on it.
Yes, at the moment, because we are not using the main boiler, we are using the bagasse, which is very important for us. This is the practice that has been used thousands of years ago, I guess. Probably since the inception of sugarcane. The waste from the factory are being added back to the land to increase fertility, to help with retention of water, to keep down weeds, provide a bit of nutrients. And it's working very, very well for us. This is a practice. I'm beginning to be a little concerned that the big boiler is going to use up all the bagasse and we wouldn't get any to put into the field. Also, we are using as Devon mentioned, we are using the waste treatment, the treatment from the distillery, the wastewater treatment. After it's been treated, we are using it as irrigation water for the fields, and we are noticing that it's working very, very well. And we must commend our general manager for using those waste products back into the field to enhance production, we have no doubt that it's increasing our productive levels in the field. That's it, gentlemen.
And if we move on to the last slide, Devon, you want to talk us through this slide?
Right. So, as you know, a project of that nature will require some environmental and social impact assessment. That was done. Part of the mandate that was given to us at Renegade is to develop what we call a construction environmental management plan and an operational environmental management plan. That will form the basis of our general environmental management program. We had to develop that plan and submit it to our physical planning for compliance. That was developed, was sent in, was approved. The CEMP, which is the Construction Environmental Management Plan, was basically used along with the contractor, the construction managers, and all the do's and don'ts of that plan was carried out during the construction phase. Now we basically in the operational phase, and we are executing what we say we would do in terms of compliance in our operational environmental management plan. Part of it is that we're managing the mangrove. As I mentioned earlier, we have a wetland system close to us. And after we treat the waste, the primary and secondary treatment, and we send it to the trench for the tertiary treatment, that wastewater will go down to, there's a mangrove area down the road. So what we're doing is that we are monitoring the mangrove system because we consider it to be a sensitive habitat. We wanted to do it, have an external group managing us for compliance. So we have I think it's from St. George's University. There is an environmental group down there, and the marine biology.
The marine biology department.
Marine biology group, exactly. And they are monitoring. And so they come for the past year or so, a year and a half, almost. So they've been during the construction phase. They've been taking tests at different sample points and showing what are the parameters in the water, monitoring the mangrove. Now in the operational phase, they presented that results. They made their recommendations to our compliance officer and the team, and they are now doing it in the operational phase also. We have a compliance personnel and staff also, as Jane and most of you all know, and when we are doing when we are clearing to plant the cane and so on, to plant the farms around the distillery, we also have what we call, and he formed part of that environmental impact assessment team, a forestry and conservation officer. He was contracted specifically so he could guide us in terms of what trees to cut down, what are the resident trees in the area, what are the transient animal, like flora and fauna in the area, so that we could keep the particular trees for that. And so other than the fact that BJ was speaking in terms of the practices in terms of farming and keeping windbreaks, that forestry officer also advised us along to what type of trees, what species of plants to keep, and so that we could merge that new cane farming with the existing ecosystem.
Okay. So that in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, is our presentation. As you can see, we're situated ideally on the coast, and this last slide does show the wetland in the background. A nice photo of the sun rising, because that's facing east on the northeast coast of Grenada.
Yeah, beautiful. And if I remember, not far from River Antoine at all, maybe like a mile or two from River Antoine.
Probably about a mile as a crow flies, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Or the pelican in the case of this photo.
Yeah. Okay, we have some questions here. Thank you for that. We have
the area behind.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying the area behind the all around the farm, the distillery will be cultivated with sugarcane. So if we look at a similar shot next year, instead of containers and construction stuff, you'll be seeing sugarcane fields.
Yeah, It's definitely a gorgeous stretch of road along the coast there in Grenada. So we have some questions. First one, I think, goes to BJ. It says, what varietals of sugar cane does CaneCo focus on, and why those particular varietals?
Those varieties were chosen initially by Booker Tate, and they were processed in the UK. I think it's tissue cultured plants. They were developed at one government facility, and then we more or less transplanted them into our field. The varieties that we chose is based on lots of different factors. Some are drought resistant, some are have very high sugar content, some are tolerant to certain diseases and stuff like that. We are in the process of collecting and recording information of all the different varieties, and we will select in the end those varieties that we think are performing much better, and keep those varieties and eliminate those that we think are not suited for us. We may look into getting new varieties as time proceed. However, at this point in time, we are working with 6 varieties, and we are getting better result than expected.
That's great. Okay, next question.
Two of the
oh.
two.
Go ahead.
Sorry, man. Yeah, my connection seems to be a bit delayed. 2 of the varieties were existing varieties that had grown in Grenada in the past. So they were proven varieties in Grenada, but we bought in the pure tissue culture variety from Barbados, actually, the breeding station in Barbados. And then the other varieties were varieties used in Guadeloupe and Martinique specifically for rum production.
Okay. So next question, do the mills use 4 rollers at each station as the diagram indicates? And then the follow on, what is the advantage of 4 crush rollers versus the more typical 3 rollers?
Devon, I want to believe it's three rollers.
It's true.
I stand corrected.
Yeah, it's 3 rollers we use now. We have space for a 420 if we need to.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. All right. And then next one, Vaughn asked, how does your CIP work in the fermenters? And CIP is clean in place. So how does the CIP work in the fermenters?
Well, if you mean if it works good or not, it works good. Yeah, it is working well for us. The CIP actually, I mean, we all know, and we take particular interest in our CIP because we know of the substrate we're using is cane juice, which have a very zero and no shelf life, very easy to be contaminated and so, and try to avoid all kind of dead legs and so in the fermenters. And so we take a lot of interest in our CIP. Actually, it is one of the first things that we commissioned before we decided to run any process. But it works very well. We have a good push out there. We had the disadvantage or the unfortunate thing of having some soils in the cane at times, and the CIP have proven to push it out very well. And I could say that it works well. We even tried the CIP in the pots and the retorts. In the pot still, and it worked well. CIP the buffer tank. So CIP is working very well from all ends so far.
That's good. Yeah. The next one is from Vaughn, and he says, the fields are all on the east side of the island. Are there any plans to grow cane on the west coast? And any thoughts on what differences that might introduce?
To answer the question, yes, our plan is to try different areas and to see, even at one time initially we looked at a plotted land at about 1,500 feet above sea level, which was just over Guave on the west coast in an estate called Plaisance, and but the real problem we have is the transportation of the sugarcane to the site, and similarly, you know, the west coast also tends to be a lot more rocky than by rocky in Grenada it's volcanic, and we have a lot of what we call big stones, and the west coast is where all those big stones are. So it really is a challenge in field preparation, but certainly we do intend to experiment with some farms on that side. We really been trying to get some land from Douglaston Estate, which is just outside Wharf, which is one of the few areas where there's a lot of flat land. And ideally, we would really like to get at least 50 acres on that side. So yes, Vaughn, our plan is to get some variety on the west coast as well.
Okay.
Because we are driven by terroir, and we are of the opinion that the eastern side of the country, both in terms of soil type and climatic conditions and other factors, differ distinctly. So we have no doubt in our minds that if we are growing cane on the western side of the country, there might be factors there that we can rely on to give us different tastes when it comes to the actual production of rum.
Okay. So I think next one is a question for Devon. It says, what characteristics does Renegade's proprietary yeast lend to the rum?
As I say, we haven't been using the proprietary yeast as yet. We haven't developed it as yet. To be honest, we don't know what it will lend, but it's from a marketing point of view, it will be like a good marketing concept that you provide. You have your own. If we're talking about the origin of the rum, and we say it is Grenadian grown sugarcane produced in Grenada locally, we know where the raw material is coming from. We'll research and see what strains we could extract from our fields and see how we could use that. But in terms of saying what it gives the rum, what flavor profile, I won't be able to answer that because we haven't used that yeast yet.
So it's something like you're using a more standard yeast now, but in the future you intend to create your own. Okay.
Yeah, we're using the standard yeast off the shelf now that we know, because we're in the commissioning phase and in the first year of production. I mean, it is worthwhile using something you know so that you could balance all the variables before you move into the unknown.
Right. Yeah. Reduce your unknown variables. Okay. And next one is Vaughn asked, I'm not sure if he's joking, is there anything you guys have not thought of?
We were hoping he would tell us. We were hoping he would tell us.
The scale of what you're doing and just everything you have done so far is incredibly impressive. So, I'm a fan. Question from Dave Russell. We know Dave loves to travel all around the Caribbean. He says, please describe your plans for hosting public tours of the distillery, construction of a tasting room, and so on and so forth.
Those plans are very much in train. We do have an area designated for visitor reception area, and we do have plans to pursue that. Obviously, it's a question of priorities, and right now visitors to Grenada versus COVID experience, it has sort of been put on the back burner versus commissioning equipment and trying to get. Actually, we're now having problems getting people in, much less facilitating them when they arrive. But yes, very much so. We do have plans, and we have a very active marketing group that will be coordinating all those activities.
Right. Okay. And the last question is from Karsten at E&A Shear. Can I place my order?
Yes, maybe we could start talking about putting aside some barrels, but certainly it's a discussion to be had.
Right, for sure. I would imagine absolutely that Carson would be interested in what you're doing there. So this has been fantastic. The comment stream has has been, lit up with people saying this is a great presentation. They love the level of technical detail, what you're doing there, all the attention to environmental concerns. So thank you very much for doing this. Anything you'd like to say before we have Will take us out?
No, I mean, I just, thanks for the opportunity to share what we're doing down here. It's good to be, to be getting Grenada up into some serious distillation. We're quite proud of the fact that we are trying to revive the agricultural industry in Grenada, which is really in dire need of resuscitation. It's good to be part of this whole scheme, and we welcome the interest, and we look forward to enjoying the support of all the technical experts at WSPA and leaning on one another. And we're happy to be up and running finally.
Yeah, I can't wait to return and try some rum straight off the still. So this is, I believe, our last session of WSPA Distilleries for a while, unless we can dig up some more. I think we've gotten everybody that we've been able to get. So we may take a little hiatus from this for a while, but I know Vaughn and I have been plotting some interesting new content for next year, which we'll let you know about as soon as we know what's happening. But thank you again for coming and for being part of this. And Will, you want to take us out?
Yes, just to echo what Matt said, thank you guys so much for doing this. Lots of really positive comments from people very excited to try Renegade Rum in the comment section. And I think I found myself relating to Vaughn's question of, is there anything that you guys have not thought of yet? Because just a really fascinating operation you have set up there. And I, like everyone else here, really excited to see what comes next. So thank you very much. And thank you to WSPA for executing so many of these phenomenal live streams. I think it's really, we take for granted, I think, as rum enthusiasts sometimes, like when we're able to easily find this type of information about distilleries, it's really difficult to find out a lot of this information. So people like Matt, who, go the extra mile to really get these details out, and people like, Renegade, who are willing to take the time and sit down and share this information, is really special. So thank you to you guys for doing this. And I'm excited to see what comes next year.
Welcome.
All right.
Well, until then, take care, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.